Hello, today's video is about 5 things to avoid when buying a knife. These are 5 pretty elementary issues that I think should be stamped out more or less entirely. There are some very minor exceptions to a lot of these, I am sure, but as general rules, these 5 things are 5 things to just straight out avoid when shopping for a knife. I'll also talk about how to mitigate them, but we're going to keep it pretty brief, pretty digestible. Remember to hit like and subscribe if you like my knife chat content. First up is the hollow handle on generally on a fixed blade knife. Hollow handles are 9 out of 10 cases, no good. They're usually very weak at the point where the knife meets the handle and the tang and the guard. So this one here is held in just with a single hex head screw. And I've tightened the screw down as much as I can, and there is still just a little bit of rattle and wiggle in it. So not a very good sign of the enduring durability of the blade. And it's, it's a nice idea, obviously from the Rambo movie, you unscrew your knife, you've got your little fishing kit in there, or your first aid kit, or your fire kit, or whatever. This one's got a tiny little bit of a all-in-one sort of fish hooks and supplies and a couple of waterproof matches, I think. But generally speaking, you're gonna have to pay a lot for this to not be a massive point of weakness on the knife. And it is, in the truest sense, just a gimmick. So avoid this, it's a gimmick. Unless you're paying like a lot of money and you've really done your research on what a good hollowed handle survival knife is, generally they're going to cost you several $100s to get one, because it's going to have to be an all-in-one integral piece of steel that is sort of, a lot of stock removal has happened and some differential heat treatments happened for the blade. It's a complex process to make a good hollow handled knife, and chances are if you're paying under $100, it's going to be a terrible one. So don't waste your money. Next one, and we're sticking with this knife because it's a good example of a couple of knife don'ts, is the sawback on a knife. So in general terms, a sawback is just going to be a thing that causes you more problems than actual beneficial uses. You would be better off just carrying a small Victorinox which has a saw that is about that long. Even the blades that have the full length sawback, it's not worth it. You're just going to end up cutting yourself on it. It ruins any purpose of a sharpened spine or anything else that you might just need to lean against the knife spine for, maybe to push it through something, to give you a hand to maybe batten through if you're doing some like kneel down firewood splitting. It's always invariably gets bound up at the first sort of inch or so, because generally speaking, a knife blade isn't a great basis for a saw, because unless it is a full flat grind that gradually tapers from the saw, you've got to have this thick bit which is the same stock thickness as the saw teeth, and saw teeth need to taper away from them as soon as they're finished. As soon as the saw teeth have ended, it needs to taper away from that, so it's actually cutting and sinking in and leading through the wood cut. And anything that's got the same stock thickness behind the teeth as the teeth themselves is going to get bound up and is not going to work, and at the most it's going to cut a notch. But guarantee you, in the literature for the blade, it's going to say that you can cut down a tree with it, and it's just not going to do it. It's going to be annoying, and it's going to cause you more problems than solutions, having spiky weirdness on the back of your blade. Carry a little saw, carry a Leatherman, carry something else if you need that function when you're out doing your wood stuff. A knife is a multi-tool on its own without needing extra multi-tool stuff added to it. With those two out the way, these next 3 are ones that you do really see quite often still. And the first one is knives with excessively ergonomic seeming grips. That's where a knife handle will seem to have a little space made out for each finger on your hand. Never buy one of those knives without having held it in your hand before. There are some very well-regarded companies that still make knives like this, and the chances of your hand not fitting that knife very well are very, very high. I don't have any knives like that anymore because I've long since moved to very neutral knife handles. Knife handles should just be able to fit basically any hand. Some are still too long and short for some people, but this is just a very basic example. The more basic a knife handle, the better. Sometimes there will be a single rise for one finger, like I'll show you my more Bushcraft Black, for example. Even that can sometimes be a bit much. The more neutral a knife handle, the better. If you're buying a knife without having it in your hand, sight unseen, off the internet or something, if it looks like it's got too much detail or too much ergonomics on the handle, don't buy it. You go to a knife shop and you hold that knife in your hand before you order it. It's going to come, and chances are, unless your hand is a perfect match for it, and as far as I know, knife sites aren't doing no size charts for knife hand to handle grooves. Just don't even worry about it. Get something with a simple handle if you're buying a knife sight unseen or hand unfelt. The next one is relating to steel, and I'm not getting full nerdy saying these exact steels. All I'm saying is if the knife isn't saying what kind of steel it is, it's probably bad. It's probably bad steel. Here are some things that sound like they're steels, but are not actual steels. Inox, not a steel, just a way of saying stainless steel. Rostfrei, just stainless steel, doesn't mean anything. Surgical stainless doesn't mean anything. It just means stainless steel. And generally most of those steels are going to be the equivalent of like a 440A, a very kind of old-fashioned basic cutlery steel from probably the late 70s or something like that. It's not going to be very good. If a knife company is proud of its steel, they will tell you what the steel is. The two exceptions I can think of are Victorinox, which you can still find the steel name out there, but they don't obviously publish it because that's just our Victorinox steel. And Mora. Mora's steels are, they recycled Swedish stainless steels, which seem pretty good, but even then it's hard to tell exactly what they are. But those are about the only two notable exceptions I can think of where you don't want to at least have some designation of the steel. And this is on everything from kitchen knives through to pocket knives, through to fixed blade knives. It needs to say what the steel is on it, and not just a word, not just a catch-all word like stainless or surgical or Rostfrei or Inox. Nothing like that. It needs to say an exact nerdy name of a steel. It should be a number and a couple of letters or something like that. I don't care what steel it is. Like pretty much as long as they're saying it, it's fine enough. Fine enough. And then there's other things that come into play, I suppose, with value and whatnot. Not even getting into that there. It needs to say what the steel is, and if it doesn't, be very skeptical. And lastly, be very careful of scam knife companies on the internet. The best way to avoid this is by shopping at proper knife websites or knife stores, because they're not going to carry scam sites or scam knife companies, or at least they're not likely to. And generally, once something gets pointed out as sus, the knife company will pull them off their range. There's some level of control there. But if you see a knife through Instagram that's coming up that seems to have all these amazing sales and specials on it and touting all these amazing claims and stuff, really do your research. And I'd really recommend the site called bladespower.com, especially for kitchen knives. They go through all of them. Look, I get how you fall for these things, especially for people who aren't really into knives. This is a husk knife, which I may have mentioned a few times lately. You look at it, this looks like a really high-end special product when you get it and when you see it on the website and whatnot. It comes in a nice little case, laser taken, laser cut, really, really nice looking, kind of stylishly interesting looking. You can see how these do sell for sure. But what these actually are knives that are made in factories in China and sold for $3 each to these companies that then just put them in nicer boxes and make them seem like they're heritage listed amazing Japanese products. And these aren't made in Japan. So the best way to avoid these scams is, unless you really want to painstakingly go through the websites and do all your own research, just get your kitchen knives from kitchen knife shops and then apply some of those previous rules I've sort of already said. So nice neutral handles, named steels and whatnot. These sorts of things, they may just sit in the drawer and be relatively inert and not cause any damage. But if someone was really relying on this as their main kitchen knife, they'd find a lot of frustrations with it, especially given the handle ergonomics. The way the blade cuts, the grind, whilst it looks really cool, is not particularly effective for cutting through all kinds of food. This surface here builds up and gets stuff in it that makes it harder to clean. The wood is, of course, this one's not even fitted particularly well, but the wood's, of course, not going to be very good to wash. It's going to get, it's not treated, it's not sealed. There's a whole lot actually wrong with these knives that you start to become apparent after you've, begun using them for a little bit of time. Least of all speaking, that these will not say what steel they're in, or they'll say this one proudly on the back of its box says it's in 1810 stainless steel, which sounds like a thing, but it's not actually a thing that you want in a knife. It's a steel that you generally make pots and pans out of. So there's a lot to be, wary of when you find these like single purpose knife sites. I'll just strongly recommend you check out the Blades Power website below. It'll go through Kamikoto, through Husk, through Harco, through a lot of the ones you've probably seen on Instagram and viral sites and Facebook and things like that. Generally speaking, best rule is shop from kitchen knife shop, unless you can really sort of maybe do a deep dive into reviews. But then reviews can often, especially with these, be bought and paid for and be really quick and superficial. So best rule is just to shop on a knife shop and just look after yourself that way. All right, so those are 5 super basic things. I'm not even going into real kind of the deep lore of what makes knives really good or not. Just 5 really basic rules that I think a lot of people would do better knowing than not knowing. So if you've got any more really basic ones, by all means, chuck them down in the comments. Could be a great resource pit for someone who's maybe come across a knife they're about to buy and thought, I might do a quick Google on this and maybe this video will come up and maybe help you out a little bit. So in short, hollow handles, sawback blades, groovy handles, overly ergonomic handles, nameless steels, and sort of viral fad knives. Steer clear of all those 5 things. There's a lot to enjoy in the knife world. Generally, the best thing to do is shop at a good, respected knife shop, and those will be pretty apparent when you start looking. The ones with huge ranges, with great YouTube channels that show things, and that's the best place to start. All good? See you in the next video, and goodbye.